Welcome back to our channel, viewers. I hope you're ready to know about some of the most mysterious and darkest cases that have ever occurred in the history of mankind. The intensity of these cases are enough to send shivers down your spine. Our first story is about a 25-year-old ambitious and radiant girl named Lisa Theris, a young millennial living in the outskirts of Louisiana, Alabama with her parents. She was studying to become a radiologist and had a very bright future ahead of her. On July 23, 2017, Lisa was reported missing by her father, William Theris. William reported that Lisa had not been home since the 18th of July, even when she told him that she was just 40 minutes away from the house. Lisa had been living with her parents since her breakup with her boyfriend in February. She left her boyfriend due to his infidelity and will never provide for the both of them. She had joined a community college in Louisiana and was trying to make both ends meet on her own. Her sudden disappearance had taken everyone by surprise. The Troy Police Department of Alabama had started investigating this case when they found out that Lisa did not have a very settled life. Lisa's friends confirmed that ever since her breakup, she had not been herself. She would party late at night, get drunk, and hang out with mobsters and alcoholics. Given that she was suffering from partial blindness and an undiagnosed mental condition that required her to take medications daily, William Theris reported to the police that on the day of Lisa's disappearance, she had to be presented in the court for a misdemeanor case. When authorities looked deeper into this, they found out that on June 8, 2017, Lisa attended a friend's hearing in Coffee County. She was under the influence of drugs and had behaved badly in the court, which led her into prison for 3 months and a fine of up to $500. Despite all these charges, she was granted bail and was expected to be present on her trial on July 18. But surprisingly, she never made it. The police started investigating the local bars and pubs in hopes to find Lisa. A few local people told the police that on July 18, Lisa was seen hanging out with 2 older men named Manly Green Davis and Randall Wade Oswald before she disappeared. On further investigations, the police found out that these 2 men were suspects of burglary in a lodge little far away from the town of Alabama. Davis and Oswald both got arrested and confessed about being with Lisa on the day of robbery. Davis told the police that before they started the robbery, Lisa left them and jumped out of the truck, while Oswald claimed that Davis had shot Lisa in the head and hid her body in the lake near the lodge because she insisted on telling everyone about the robbery. The police found the story shallow and very contradicting, but still, they decided to search for her body in the lake. Unfortunately, there was no sign of Lisa nor her body. A month went by and there was no sign of Lisa. To give some closure to the case, the police sentenced Davis and Oswald to jail time for larceny in first degree and mass murdering Lisa Theris. Lisa Theris was announced dead. Even the misdemeanor case on her got closed due to her sudden disappearance and assumable death. Everything was so hard to believe for Lisa's friends and family, but the authorities had failed to give them any hope. For William Theris, this was the end of her daughter's tragic story, but the universe had other plans. On August 25, 2017, a month after Lisa's disappearance, something mysterious and shocking happened. Judy Gardner, a brunette businesswoman, was traveling for work from Florida to Alabama on the US motorway when she saw something strange on the road. She stopped her car in suspicion that it might be an animal that strayed away from the 2,000-acre woodland besides the motorway. To her surprise, it was a naked woman lying down on the side of the road. She was covered in insect bites, mud, and was looking very thin from her appearance. Judy called the police to rescue that fragile-looking woman. The police came and took that woman to the hospital. To their surprise, it was Lisa Theris, the girl who everyone thought was dead. Lisa was unconscious when she was taken in. The doctor said that her skin had cracked from dehydration, and they had no idea how she survived in such atrocious living conditions. There was dilemma all around, and the answers could only be found through Lisa. Lisa recovered, and the time came for the truth to be told. The press got involved in this investigation as they were mysterious about what happened to Lisa. Lisa issued a statement that on July 18, 2017, Davis and Oswald abducted her on her way to her father's house. She could not see without her glasses, so both of the men took everything away and drugged her to take advantage of Lisa. She told the reporters that she ran away into the woodland to save her life and survived 25 days eating berries, wild mushrooms, and drinking muddy steam water. Due to her blindness, it was hard for her to find a way out of that woodland, which added more to her misery. The doctors had performed various tests on Lisa and had confirmed that she wouldn't have survived one more day if she was not rescued. The suspicion started rising on why Lisa got abducted only on the day when she was supposed to be presented for her trial. The police could not find a solid ground for all the suspicions and claimed that Lisa was hallucinating and was under a high influence of meth. Keeping all this in sight, Lisa Theris had to be set free. This case was not less than a miracle for Lisa's family, but many spectators believe that it could be a case of pure trickery. The answers remain unclear to this date. Sharon Marshall. Our next story is equally unbelievable and terrifying at the same time. Sometimes people live with such dark secrets that it becomes hard to decipher if all of it was ever true. Sharon Marshall, a beautiful young girl in the peak years of her education living in Forest Park, Georgia. She was a high school student with big ambitions of pursuing aerospace engineering from a renowned institute of Georgia. She wanted to fulfill her dream of working at NASA. Sharon was unstoppable, but dreams have a habit of being broken. She got pregnant in the very last months of her high school. To everyone's surprise, she hid that pregnancy from her boyfriend and went on to give birth alone. Later, she gave up her baby to a wealthy couple in Georgia. All of this took away her one and only chance to go to college to pursue her passion. She was devastated, so she tried to run away with her boyfriend to another city, but failed. Sharon's fate had something else in store for her. She broke up with her high school boyfriend and left for Tampa, Florida with a man named Franklin Delano Floyd. Everyone assumed that they were a couple, but Sharon dated another man while being with Frank at the same time. Their relationship was hard to identify whether they were lovers or friends. That same year, Sharon again got pregnant with the man she was seeing, but this time she decided to keep the baby. In 1986, her son Michael Gregory Marshall was born. Sharon and Franklin both decided to look after the baby together. Franklin was a painter, but due to his constant backaches, he was unable to work. This led Sharon to work as an exotic dancer in Florida's biggest strip club. Sharon and Franklin both depended on the welfare checks to care for Michael, as Sharon did not make enough money as a dancer. Franklin was always a very unpleasant and angry man. He used to go to Sharon's workplace and pick fights with her co-workers. Cheryl Camesso, an 18-year-old dancer, shared a very deep bond with Sharon, as both of them were good friends and co-workers. On a weekend in 1989, Sharon, Cheryl, and Franklin went on a boating trip together, but a fight broke out between Cheryl and Frank. Cheryl blamed Sharon that she was hiding her true income while still claiming to be dependent on the welfare funds. This made Franklin furious, as he wanted to hide his and Sharon's truth. He punched Cheryl in the face and threatened to kill her. Shortly after the fight, Cheryl left for another country, but she never made it there. When her father was not able to reach her, he reported her missing. The investigation began in hopes of finding Cheryl. Sharon and Franklin were considered as the prime suspects, but no evidence was found that could decipher Cheryl's disappearance. Sharon and Franklin left Tampa after this incident. Their sudden move only aroused more suspicion because they started using different names for traveling. In 1989, Sharon and Frank got married in order to give Sharon's son Frank's family name. Sharon and Frank kept using different names to move around and ended up staying in Tulsa, Oklahoma, to start a new life with their son Michael. Sharon started working again as an exotic dancer. Sharon's friends reported that she wanted to leave Franklin, but she was afraid of what he might do to her and her son. Franklin was violent and a very aggressive man who always wanted control over Sharon. Sharon had met a man where she worked and wanted to elope with her, but before she could do it, she was found unconscious on the Oklahoma highway. The police stated that it was a case of hit and run. Sharon remained unconscious for 5 days before she passed away. Her friends reported that she was getting better before her death, so it was hard to believe that she died. The suspicions were once again on Franklin, as Sharon had various bruises on her body and the doctors claimed that it might be a homicide and not a hit-and-run case. The police again did not find any evidence against Franklin, as he claimed that he was sleeping during Sharon's accident. Instantly after Sharon's death, Franklin claimed the $80,000 insurance policy he had registered on Sharon a few months prior to her death. The insurance money did not come through, as Franklin did not use his real name. Unfortunately, in order to get the money, Franklin had to tell the company his real name, which opened another mystery Franklin had been hiding. When the authorities investigated his name, they found out that Franklin had a very long criminal history. In 1962, 19-year-old Franklin was convicted to 20 years of prison for abducting and assaulting a 4-year-old girl. The tables turned when Franklin escaped the prison using a vehicle only to rob a bank and get convicted again. Franklin's crime never stopped, as in 1972, he got released but again got convicted for abducting a woman from the gas station. This time, Frank paid for his bail and soon vanished by using fake names. Franklin stayed as a free man until he had to give his real name to the insurance company. The police located him in Georgia and put him in prison to complete his sentence. Meanwhile, his son Michael was adopted by a pretty decent family in Oklahoma. Given that Franklin was Michael's father, Michael used to visit him in prison, but his behavior was always uncanny and peculiar towards him. The police conducted a DNA test only to find out that Michael was not his biological son. The story does not end here, as many secrets were to be revealed as of yet. In September 1994, 4 years after Sharon's death, Franklin came out of parole and went to abduct Michael from his elementary school. He put a gun on the principal's head and fled away with Michael. When the news of the abduction came out, the investigation began, but the police did not find Frank for the next 2 months. Finally, after an extensive search, Franklin got convicted in Kentucky with no presence of Michael near him. Franklin refused to tell anyone about him, and the authorities failed to get any clue. Franklin's trial began on Michael's kidnapping. Slowly and steadily, things started to surface. In 1995, a rotten skeleton was found in the outskirts of Florida. The authorities could not decipher her identity, but it was claimed that the victim had died of gunshots. Call it fate or a coincidence, following that year, a man purchased a truck in Kansas and found 97 photographs of a woman with wounds and bruises from beating. The truck previously belonged to Franklin Floyd, who stole it during his escape to Oklahoma before abandoning it again. The wounds on one of those photographs were matched with the skeleton that was found in Florida. Shockingly, it was the remains of Cheryl Comesso, the co-worker of Sharon who disappeared. The case started to have a solid foundation, as it was confirmed that Franklin had killed Cheryl. The case took a more shocking turn when the photographs that were found had a photo of Franklin assaulting a young girl. The police began a thorough research on Franklin's previous life. It was not until 2014 when Sharon Marshall's true identity was revealed. It was believed that after Franklin escaped from the prison in 1970, he married a woman named Sandy Chipman. Sandy had 4 kids from her previous marriage. She was sentenced to 30 days in prison after being convicted with the crime of passing blank checks. On her 30-day parole, Franklin fled Georgia with her 4 kids and gave each one of her kids to different social services except her oldest daughter, Sharon Marshall, whose real name was Suzanne Marie Savarkis. Franklin moved many cities with Suzanne claiming to be her caretaker and told many stories to those around him. Franklin named Suzanne as Tanya Hughes and later gave her the name Sharon Marshall when she started going to high school. Franklin assaulted the young girl, called her daughter, and later married her. This was unbelievable even for the jury, but all of this was true. Franklin was sentenced to 52 years of prison and later a death penalty on Cheryl's murder. Suspicion also said that he murdered Sharon Marshall and her son Michael, but no evidence was found regarding both of them. To this day, this story remains as a shocking accident ever to exist in judicial history. Celeste the Nurse. Our next story goes hand in hand with the first one, as it's a twisted case of disappearance. It all began when on April 28, 1997, a woman named Celeste living in Cape Town, South Africa, gave birth to a beautiful girl named Zephany. Celeste was a nurse working at one of the biggest hospitals in South Africa. She and her husband were trying to have a baby for many years until Zephany was finally born. The couple could not be happier than this. They wanted to take Zephany home, but due to her fragile condition, the hospital advised the couple to stay in hospital for the next 3 days. Everything seemed like a fairy tale as Celeste was having the time of her life, holding her baby into her arms. The day of taking Zephany came, but before things could work out, an enormous cloud of horror took over. Zephany got abducted. On April 30, 1991, a woman dressed in nurse's green-colored scrubs walked through the maternity ward and ran away with Zephany. According to Celeste, she was under the influence of high-dosage medicine, and when the woman came, she thought it was one of the nurses trying to check up on Zephany. It was a far cry of help from that little baby. The couple instantly called the police to find their little girl. Investigation started and the entire hospital staff was looked into. The details of the crime were very shocking as the police found a pillow in the tunnel that connected the maternity ward to the outside road. It became crystal clear that the woman had pretended to be pregnant and ran away with Zephany through that tunnel. Other accounts of the incidents were also revealed as some patients at the hospital reported that they had seen a woman playing with her babies, but due to their conscious awareness, she did not abduct them. Celeste happened to be unlucky. The investigations kept going for months until the police finally gave up on finding Zephany. Celeste and her husband went on to have 3 more babies as the hope of recovering Zephany was less than a decimal. For everyone, this was the end of a girl named Zephany. All 3 kids of Celeste had grown up to become teenagers now. It had been 17 years since Zephany was stolen. In January 2015, the final term had begun in the Zwanswick High School of Cape Town and everyone was busy preparing for their exams. A 17-year-old girl named Michelle Solomon also studied there. She happened to be a very bright student with a big social circle. According to the principal, she was the heart of Zwanswick. It was a normal Monday when Michelle went to school, but something strange kept happening as her friends kept telling her about a girl in their school. Michelle was intrigued by this constant reminder and she went to meet that girl her friends were telling her about. The girl's name was Cassidy and she was 2 years younger than Michelle. One thing was very peculiar about Cassidy, that she looked so similar to Michelle. This was the reason why everyone at school kept talking about both of them. Michelle instantly hit it off with Cassidy. Besides their familiar faces, their interests were also very common. They would talk day in and day out and soon became best friends. They would often joke about being sisters in another lifetime due to the similarities they shared. This was the time when Michelle took a selfie of both of them and sent it to her parents. Michelle's parents were also shocked to see how familiar their daughter looked to Cassidy. Michelle's mother Lavona noticed these similarities and thought it might have been a sweet coincidence. Meanwhile, when Cassidy showed her parents the selfie, they had a very different reaction as Cassidy's parents were Celeste and Morny Nurse. They became immensely interested in knowing more about Michelle, as they hoped it was their lost daughter Zephany. They asked Cassidy to find out if Michelle was born on April 28, 1991. Cassidy did her investigation and found out that Michelle's birth date was the same. Both Celeste and Morn went to the police station to reopen the case of their lost daughter. The police got involved again in order to give color to these rumors. They did a DNA test on Michelle. The truth was shocking for everyone, as the DNA test proved that Michelle was actually Zephany, the daughter of Celeste and Morn. Michelle's mother was arrested on the charges of kidnapping Zephany, while Michelle's father said that he had no clue that Michelle was not his biological daughter. Livona confessed that she was pregnant at the time of Zephany's abduction and was admitted into the same hospital. She had a miscarriage and she was desperate to have a baby. This was the reason she abducted Zephany and raised her as her own daughter. The more shocking twist was that all these years, Zephany was being raised just 3 miles away from her real parents. Livona was sentenced to 10 years of prison and Michelle was given in the custody of her own parents. This did not end well for both of the families, as Michelle's life was split into 2 identities. She decided to keep her name Michelle Solomon instead of Zephany and kept trying to mend her ways back into her original roots. Such cases always make you wonder whether it has come straight out of the movies or one's own imagination. Patricia Stalling. Our next story is about a very uncanny medical confusion that led to the demarcation of a happy and loving family. In the mid-1980s, Patricia Stalling, a middle-aged woman who was trying to make both ends meet after deciding to live on her own. She had taken up a job in a convenience store in St. Louis. Patricia worked as a store clerk when she met David, her future husband. They both started dating and got married in 1986. Their love was in full bloom and they were planning to soon start a family. Just after 2 years of their full-blown romance, Patricia and David welcomed a beautiful boy named Ryan. Ryan was a healthy and a very handsome baby. He had lit up both David and Patricia's life. Life was prosperous for the couple, until one day, the unexpected happened. Ryan started having problems with breathing. His parents were worried, so they rushed him to the hospital. The doctors took Ryan under their care, but they couldn't stop Ryan's vomiting. Ryan was just 2 months old at that time. Several blood tests were conducted, keeping in view Ryan's worsening condition. The results came back with a very shocking revelation. It turned out that Ryan had high levels of ethylene glycol in his blood. Ethylene glycol is used for antifreeze poisoning, and that little baby had nothing to do with it. There was only one explanation for it, that Patricia, Ryan's mother, had poisoned her own baby. Ryan was treated with the right medicines and recovered properly, but he was not handed over to the couple. Rather, the hospital gave him into the custody of family services. The police also got involved and started looking for evidence. Patricia and David were allowed to meet Ryan on only Thursdays. This kept on for 3 months until one Thursday, Ryan again got mysteriously sick and was rushed to the hospital. The authorities blamed Patricia for poisoning her own baby and found a bottle of ethylene in her house. Things took a rapid turn when Ryan could not survive the poisoning and died just as a 5-month-old. Patricia was arrested in his son's death and was sent to prison for life. Her days as an inmate began, but the universe had something else in store for her. She was pregnant at the time of her arrest and gave birth to her second son in jail, David Jr. Given her past records, her son was instantly taken away from her so that she could not do any harm to her baby as she did to Ryan. Patricia's plea for help was never heard. Fast forward 2 months, David Jr. also started showing the same symptoms as his deceased younger brother. He refused to eat and had difficulty breathing. The hospital authorities were curious about what was happening. They again conducted many blood tests and found out that David Jr. had methylmalonic acidemia, which was a genetic disorder that created excess propylene glycol in a human's blood. This caused a serious dilemma in everyone, as it seemed that Ryan had the same genetic disorder which the hospital misdiagnosed. Patricia's attorney argued that Patricia never poisoned her own son and was never guilty of his son's death. A few years later, this case was telecasted on the Unsolved Mysteries, which is America's biggest show for such mysterious crimes or stories. A biochemist happened to see that show and came across this episode. He started to find out the true answers for what had happened to Ryan. He compared those blood samples and compared them. Shockingly, the truth was as clear as the day. It was evident now that Ryan had the same genetic disease David Jr. had, and it was the failure on the hospital's part that was unable to diagnose Ryan. Patricia and David both sued the hospital and the doctors, but this did not make up for any of their losses. Unfortunately, the story did not have a happy ending, as Patricia and David lost their second son David Jr. to this disorder only at the age of 23. Pettit family. Our last and final story is extremely disturbing to hear it, as it involves incidents that are unimaginable for a normal individual, but the prevalence of kindness always takes over the gray clouds of evil. The story will clearly determine how humans have the tendency to go to extreme levels of brutality in the wake of a simple obsession. Jennifer Hawk Pettit and Dr. William Pettit lived in a beautiful and safe suburban community of Cheshire, Connecticut. Both of them belonged to healthcare professions. Jennifer worked as an oncologist at the Children's Hospital in Pittsburgh, while William excelled in his career as an endocrinologist. They both shared a very loving and deep bond as a married couple. They both had two beautiful daughters, one named Haley Elizabeth, who was 17 years old, and the younger daughter named Michaela Rose, who was just 11 years old. The family was very close-knit and excelled brilliantly in all areas of life. In the summer of 2007, Haley was preparing to go to college, while Michaela was excited to start her middle school. Everything was going usual for the Pettit family, as they did not know what horror awaited them. On July 22, 2017, it was a day like any other for the suburban family. It started off with Jennifer and William both going to their work and their daughter enjoying the free time before their school begins. Michaela, the 11-year-old, loved to cook, so she decided to cook her family a scrumptious dinner that day. On the evening of July 22, Michaela and Jennifer both went to the supermarket to buy some groceries. It was a normal shopping spree with nothing unusual about it. They both came home, cooked dinner, and went back to their rooms to sleep. William decided to read some medical journals, which resulted in him staying up late and sleeping right there on the couch. It was a pleasant and tiring night for the Pettits when two masked men entered their home through the cellar door. They were armed with rifles and a baseball bat. On entering the premises, they saw William lying on the couch. They beat his head with a baseball bat and dragged him down to the basement to die. Later, they went to Jan Haley's bedroom, where they tied the mother and the two daughters with strong ropes. Their intention seemed like theft, as they ransacked the entire house in hopes of money, but they couldn't find any. Therefore, they decided to withdraw money from Jennifer's and William's family account. The night had passed in horror until the morning of July 23 came. The two masked men ordered Jennifer to withdraw $15,000 from the bank, or they would murder both of their daughters. They also asked Jennifer to call in sick for William so they would not have any suspicions regarding his disappearance. Jennifer did as they said. She went to the bank with one of the guys and withdrew this large sum of money. To the cashier's surprise, she slipped up a note stating that she and her family were held hostage and that she needed help. The bank manager instantly called the police, but when the police arrived at the bank, Jennifer had left for her house. On her way back to the house, the man had filled 2 large cans of petroleum, giving no clue to anyone what he was going to do. Until now, the news of his crime had spread like wildfire in the police department. The SWAT team was ordered to immediately rush to Pettit's house to save them. Unfortunately, it was too late. When the police reached the premises, the house was burning in Favor's ashes and the whole community was witnessing this massacre. It turned out that the two men had put 2 tanks of petroleum into the house, and before leaving with money, they set it on fire. They tried to escape in Patrick's family car but got crashed into a police mobile on their way out. Both of them were arrested on the spot, but the story is yet to unravel. The story took an unexpected turn when William Theris, who was left to die in the basement, untied himself and escaped the house. He was brutally beaten and was taken immediately to the hospital by his neighbor. He survived this terrible incident, but for Michaela, Jennifer, and Haley, they all lost their lives into the ashes. This incident affected the entire community of Cheshire, and the police had immense pressure on them to solve this case. Many people blamed the police as there was a 33-minute difference in their arrival to the house, and they were informed the family could be saved if the authorities acted quickly. Given the extensive suspicions, the investigation started and things started coming to light. The 2 men, Joshua and Stephen, who carried out the sinister plan, were investigated. Joshua told the police that on July 22, he had spotted Michaela in the grocery store and was instantly obsessed with the young girl. He followed the family to their house and found out that they were quite wealthy. He called his accomplice Stephen to take part in the sinister plan with him, of robbing and murdering the entire family without any personal conflict. The police checked the surveillance footage of the grocery store and found out that Joshua was following the mother and daughter all along. The proof and the confessions were there. The trial began and William Theris gave testimony in this gruesome case. The police convicted both Joshua and Stephen, and the court sentenced them to death. William Theris' life was never the same, neither the community of Cheshire. This was the most horrifying incident they had witnessed in front of their own eyes. A man's obsession to destroy took away 3 lives and changed the lives of several people, especially William forever. We had a very swindling experience today with all these crazy stories. I'm sure you enjoyed it as much as our previous stories. Don't forget to subscribe and press that notification bell icon so you will stay updated for our next most mysterious and tragic cases.